They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear, until it is done.
As I pen these first few words, having never made a YouTube video before, I've learned something very telling in my life. I have no idea what I'm doing. In life, in content creating, in understanding why I still follow Doctor Who. Not a damn clue. But I still find myself compelled to carry on with this endeavour. I have a duty of care almost, as I have a topic of conversation that I urgently need to address. Video games. And more specifically, Doom 2016's multiplayer. Yes, that went niche quite quickly. I've often found that Doom 2016's multiplayer to be overlooked or simply dismissed as a tacked-on mode designed solely to pad out the campaign experience, which I've always felt was a gross inaccuracy, having spent many real-world days traversing its many arenas. If I was a theatrical man, I'd almost say an injustice had occurred, one that I feel I need to set the record straight on with a few things. So friends, please join me for the foreseeable as I talk you through the underappreciated brilliance of Doom 2016's multiplayer. A couple of quick disclaimers before we get further into this video. I'm playing the Xbox version using a controller. I'm also basing my thoughts on the overhauled multiplayer they released in 2017, where they changed progression, weapon balancing, and opened up the DLC maps to everyone, so some of the points made in this video may differ for you depending on your platform or input choice. You have been warned. When Doom 2016 launched, it kinda came out of nowhere. Having Doom 3 take a more horror-orientated approach alienated some long-time fans of the series, and the originally planned Doom 4 spent the best part of a decade burning in development hell. It was safe to say that there was little in the way of expectation upon 2016's release. Even more so, the multiplayer beta released to a pretty negative response, largely due to the loadouts and non-regenerating health being the main concerns as far as I can tell. When sitting down to analyse if the multiplayer truly lived up to the hype laid out in my whimsical mind, I found that mechanics really do play well into each other, and that no one part of the multiplayer is complete without the other parts. In my opinion, the multiplayer runs like clockwork, with each individual piece spurring on the next. Therefore, I've broken down the multiplayer into what I'd consider its core elements to be, and have tried to order them in a way that flows well when talking about them as a whole. So without further ado, let's get on to the first topic. Yes, it should come as no surprise to you that the first area to discuss is the gameplay, the engine of the all-singing, all-dancing medium that we so easily take for granted. The gameplay of the multiplayer felt like a return to basics of FPS games of old, with some much-needed quality-of-life mechanics thrown into the mix. You won't find the likes of Sprint here, not in this neighbourhood, friend. Honestly, I've never been one for Sprint. Always feeling like I could be moving around the map quicker when not using it, and rapidly regretting my decision to do so when I'm on the business end of an assault rifle, completely defenceless while my character fumbles to get their weapon at the ready. Luckily, Doom doesn't suffer from this problem. You have one movement speed at all times, and it's bloody fast, meaning that you're never far from the objective of the match, and are always able to keep the momentum that comes from those chaotic firefights going. It solves my issues with Sprint by simply turning it on its head. I know I'm always moving at top speed, and I can feel it as the maps haven't been artificially expanded, so I'm able to close on objectives quickly. Equally, my gun is always ready to fire, without the worry of turning a corner and having a half-second delay before being able to respond to an opponent's rather, shall we say, egregious greeting to my presence. The main time you won't be able to hold down the fire button will be when you're pulling yourself up onto ledges. It's a pretty standard thing across most FPS games now, but one that works well here is you can combine it with double jump to give yourself some nice manoeuvrability around the map. The trade-off being, and most of the time there should be a trade-off, is that the double jump feels quite restrictive and the ledge grab stops you from firing, meaning that any shortcut you take could potentially get you killed, sending you back to spawn wasting precious time. Of course, that's just running about the place. You want to know about what the guns play like, I'm guessing. Well, my friend, you will know all about that soon enough, but to properly talk about the weapons and how they work in the sandbox, we need to look at the aim assist, one of the most vital aspects of any FPS multiplayer. Aim assist basically turns you from a visually challenged OAP, struggling to hit the wide side of a barn, into, well, your average keyboard and mouse player. Basically, you don't miss. Funny thing is, here there's a serious lack of aim assist, at least as far as I can tell. At best, there's enough to keep yourself centered, but after that you're on your own. Yet, despite the drastic change, it works surprisingly well, and means that you need to get up close and personal with your target and your objective, which seems to have been a design choice as the maps, weapons and game modes all share this trait. But I'm getting ahead of myself now. In this environment, there are no deaths from the shadows. You know the bloke, the one that creeps into every multiplayer lobby, on the lookout for the next best hidey hole to snuggle into for the rest of the game. No, here the lack of aim assist forces you into close quarters combat. Along with this, the reduction in aim assist also grants you the ability to dodge bullets. Now you can see the matrix in front of you. Strafing left and right, circling around your opponent, trying to land that final hit is thrilling, and it feels like the closest an FPS game has come to replicating the feeling of a shotgun battle from the Gears of War franchise. As a result of the lack of aim assist, you're going to be missing a lot of shots, but the game doesn't punish you for that. The removal of the reload mechanic means you can fire indefinitely. I like this change to the established formula, as it's yet another instance where the control is given back to the player. We've all been there, having 1 or 2 bullets missing from your clip, but you reload and instantly get shot. This change completely removes that. As long as you have ammo, you can fire all day long. Luckily, ammo, like health and armour, is plentiful and scattered all around the map as a pickup. It's arguably one of the biggest departures from other modern FPS games who choose to use the tried and true method of regenerating health in an attempt to give players a level footing when engaging enemies. And it seems to be one of the biggest criticisms I've seen from others when they talk about Doom's multiplayer. At first, I was confused by this choice. Going against the regenerating health cycle the likes of Halo and Call of Duty employ, it just feels like a recipe for disaster. But in my opinion, it just works. It works because it pushes you out of cover, out of that safe hidey hole that you've been sat in for the last decade. Even if you've found somewhere high up to sit, in Doom, every bullet that hits you brings you closer to death. And the only way to stop that is to scavenge the battlefield, luring you out into the close range combat the developers so eagerly wanted you to engage with. This was their plan all along. Now sure, being picked off when looking for health is frustrating, but I'd argue it makes for a nice change of pace to waiting behind cover for shields to come back before moving onwards. It honestly never felt like it happened all that often either, certainly not after every firefight since health and armour is literally everywhere. It made for a good strategy to position yourself next to a health pickup and use it mid-fight to give yourself that extra edge. I'd also argue that you can be just as easily picked off in the aforementioned Halo or COD, in that brief window that you scramble to find cover while waiting to begin the health regeneration cycle. Most likely, you wouldn't stand a chance against any opponent that happens upon you. Equally, armour provides you with that extra layer of protection, naturally allowing you to take more damage. Should you feel like you need that edge when fresh out of spawn, you could always stack up on extra armour before a fight, but in doing so you waste valuable time against the objective of the game. This does, however, bring me onto my first criticism of Doom 2016. To begin, it becomes incredibly difficult to know when you're taking damage and how much health and armour you have left. The iconic beeping of your shields in Halo, the Crimson Omen filling up with blood in Gears of War, or the splattering of red jelly across your screen in Call of Duty are all fantastic examples of being able to effectively communicate to the player just how much more punishment your character can take. Doom doesn't do that. Hell, I don't know what it does. It just kind of puts a red vignette around the edge of the screen and has your health bar flash a bit. It's honestly so difficult to know if you should be cautiously scavenging for health or kicking in the doors of hell with your 50 extra armour. And I find it quite baffling that a game where you don't regenerate health automatically isn't able to telegraph this better. This problem is further enhanced by the lack of any real method of tracking enemies. No radar like Halo, and the whisper quiet footsteps of your enemy make it difficult to know who is around you. A real problem when judging whether to stick to the edges of the map and keep out of people's way, or beeline for the nearest health pickup. It feels like there's an easy solution though, just make the footsteps louder. It works well in Gears of War with everyone wearing a size 20 clog, and wouldn't alter the rest of the Sandbox here. I will say though, that this doesn't feel like a game ruining problem personally, as fights aren't necessarily lost as soon as enemies shoot you in the back. Like I said earlier, you can dodge bullets. Along with that, there are also runes, equipment and power weapons which give you very brief see-through wall hacks, normally at the cost of a lengthy cooldown. Don't worry, it's not as broken as the Promethean vision from Halo 4. My final point for the gameplay is, it's kind of a misnomer, and it revolves around the structuring of the multiplayer playlists themselves. I've personally always hated the idea of companies taking advantage of their customers with poor business practices, and the video game industry is a cesspit of that kind of behaviour. When Doom's multiplayer was overhauled in 2017, all of the DLC maps which people paid extra for were made available to everyone regardless. As a thanks to the people that initially bought the DLC, they gave a special medal to the owners to show their loyalty, which in all honesty kinda feels like an insult more than anything. Having said that, I do genuinely feel that this wasn't an intentional move by the developers to squeeze some extra cash out of their fans. The paid DLC felt more like an attempt to circumvent the Battle Pass, live service shite that's been plaguing the industry lately, and the poor performance of the multiplayer meant that the playlist needed to be streamlined to accommodate the rapidly declining player base. Had the multiplayer been more of a success, I feel that this decision might not have been made, not at least until something like Doom Eternal released. To me, it felt like the best decision they could have made given the hand they've been dealt. And that brings us to a close on the core gameplay mechanics. There are some drastic changes from what's come before in other multiplayer games, but mostly I feel that Doom managed to stick the landing. Of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg, so let's dive deeper into those murky depths as we take a look at the map and game type Sandbox. So you've got the basics sorted, but now you need some nice looking playgrounds and a well structured book of rules to really bring all the boys to the yard. The maps and game modes of a multiplayer game should go hand in hand, with well designed maps complementing the varying objectives and how they differ from one another. This is quite the challenge for a developer to deliver, needing to make sure that no square foot goes unused while making sure that every game mode works well within the environment itself. Luckily, Doom has a strong sense of identity on what it wants its multiplayer to look like, and it shows more than anywhere else in map design and game modes. Typically, matches will feature 6v6 firefights which stick to the more traditional arena shooter feel, albeit with loadouts, but more on that later, that most recent FPS titles have shied away from. I appreciate this choice as it feels refreshing to return to a simpler time without the need to fill lobbies with 60 plus people. With that in mind, Doom keeps its maps predominantly on the smaller side, opting for an asymmetrical style lined with lots of winding corridors. This works well as there are frequent breaks in sightlines, making long-range battles or overwatch in large areas that much more difficult. In Doom, if you want to succeed, you need to get your hands dirty, and as I've mentioned previously, Doom loves to force you into CQC encounters. There never feels like there's that one area that you have to control to win. Sure, some areas are easier to defend, and height typically gives you an advantage, but Doom relishes when you're running around looking for the next person to butt heads with. It's right there in the movement speed and reload mechanics at the end of the day. To top off the stellar map design, the beautiful environments themselves offer some visually distinct locations with what you'd find in other FPS games, from floating ruins and varying circles of hell, to space stations and mining facilities. Each one of the environments feels like it's ripped straight from the campaign, and makes it feel almost like the battles you go through could be stories in themselves that play out parallel to the Doomslayer's journey. That being said, it is pretty difficult to actually recall any of the maps by name. Perdition, Imperium, Cataclysm, they don't exactly roll off the tongue. Even when talking to my friend who also spent many days playing the multiplayer, our conversations quickly turned into a guessing game of the hell one? Yeah, but which one? Outside of being able to recall the one with all the teeth or the one you really hate, nothing about their design is quite enough to be called iconic or instantly recognisable. Maps like Last Resort or Raven Down from Halo and Gears respectively have set pieces that make them more easily recognisable even to casual audiences, and it's something I would have liked to have seen more of in Doom. Most of the game modes themselves are your bog standard usual suspects. TDM and domination are the obvious choices, and work just as well here as they do everywhere else. The real highlights of the show come in the form of Warpath, Soul Harvest, and Freeze Tag. Warpath features a ring that constantly moves around a set path through the map and changes direction based on which team currently holds it, only pausing when unoccupied. This has to be one of my favourite game modes in any multiplayer. I love that it mixes up the standard domination King of the Hill game type by taking you on a tour of the map. You can get some really varied and interesting encounters from this setup, as the strategy can change drastically. When you think of a domination mode, you typically know where the best places to sit are to help you with your defense, and those strategies don't really change all that much from each game. But here, Doom wants its players to keep moving, so having to follow the objective helps to alleviate camping. Soul Harvest, on the other hand, works much the same way as Kill Confirmed does from the Call of Duty franchise. You kill an enemy and have to walk over their body and collect their soul to earn a point. The real kicker here is that there's always a demon on the field who basically acts as a walking wall of death for you to slam yourself against repeatedly, where a kill from them will reward 2 souls per person, and on their demise your team gets a chance to take over said demon. Having to approach something that has vastly superior firepower requires teamwork to bring down, and it always feels satisfying seeing the demon's health bar being chipped away at before moving in for a glory kill and taking control of it yourself. Yet again, this mode rewards players for pushing in against the enemy to earn points, and arguably does this better than Kill Confirmed, as the map design limits sightlines and hard camping over a collection of souls. Lastly, freeze tag is probably most similar to dodgeball from Gears of War 4, trying to eliminate the enemy team before they do the same to you, but only being able to respawn when an ally has earned a kill. I feel Doom does this much better, as you respawn from thawing out an ally rather than killing an enemy. This means there's more room for strategy when you're the last man alive facing an entire team, whereas in Gears you'll roll around together to limit casualties. Doom wants to break the squad up as best it can. With no radar, tracking an opponent can be difficult if you haven't brought the right equipment. So is it really wise to move around together when the enemy could be thawing out any one of 5 of their teammates? Maybe you should split up and overwatch a statue each, but then you risk being killed and having them thaw their ally out. It's a constant power struggle, and really feels like a strategy on both sides needs to be considered, even when down to the last man. One of the main criticisms I see when people mention Doom's multiplayer is the loadout system. I can wholeheartedly see their problem with this, being that arena shooters typically have all players start with the same weapons and scavenge the rest from the map. However, for me, this system works well in the Sandbox, and I want to give a few reasons on why I think that's the case. Firstly, I feel that nearly every weapon in the Sandbox is viable, as in it has its advantages and disadvantages to using it, as well as fitting a specific role. Think of it like the plasma pistol from Halo. Its actual kill potential is quite poor, but it makes up for that by being able to shred shields and disable vehicles. Here, explosive weapons are part of the loadout and hit hard, but are more difficult to use as they have slow moving projectiles. Shotguns have good kill potential, but require decent accuracy, and the only sniper in the game has a targeting reticle for opponents to see, and requires a charge up time to be at maximum effectiveness, but packs a punch on the headshots. I guess the Doom equivalent of Halo's plasma pistol analogy would be its rocket launcher. You got an enemy with an AR who keeps hiding behind cover? No problem. Fire the rocket to the side of it and detonate the payload mid-air. You'll soon push your opponent out into the open where a few shotgun pellets can be directed their way. That being said, there are a few weapons I wonder why they included. The static rifle charges from movement, packing a near fatal punch if landing a headshot when fully charged. It's a neat idea for sure, but in practice just feels unreliable. It requires movement to keep its charge, so aiming becomes more difficult, but missing your shot leaves you relying on your secondary weapon, as it'll take too long to charge another attempt. So then, why not just use your secondary weapon from the start? You'll most likely get a more accurate shot off and the penalty for missing isn't as drastic. As well as that, the Reaper struggles to find its feet, having to slowly track enemies when they aren't moving, which is, well, not very often if you're playing properly, and has middling damage on contact. There are better options if I'm honest. One of those is the AMG Mark V pistol, or the Piece to my friends and I. Not particularly needed to be mentioned in this discussion, but I've rarely had a gun in any game that works so well with the rest of my loadout, i.e. the combat shotgun. And now was the time to pay homage somehow. Thank you, Mark V. May the Peace forever reign king. Of course, shotguns are the go-to weapon in Doom. It's what the battle rifle is to Halo, the bread and butter of the Sandbox, and there's nothing wrong with that. As I've said before, this game wants close quarters combat, so it only makes sense for a shotgun to be the all-round option. This is where I feel Doom shines. Having some mid to long range weapons use slow moving projectiles helps you to play out your Matrix fantasies, and the ability to combine any weapons and equipment together as a loadout helps to omit the downfall of other weapons. They don't completely eradicate the disadvantages, but they mean you won't be caught out as often. With that comes the question of the melee. They've all struggled with it, COD, Halo, Gears. How do we make an extremely close range attack fit into our Sandbox? Doom does this the best, hands down. I'm happy to take the flak for that remark, as it's something I genuinely believe. Doom knows what it wants its guns to be, therefore it knows how to accommodate its melee. Let's look at other franchises. Call of Duty couldn't decide if its perk should empower melee through tack knife. Halo lets you put a couple of bullets into them and punch for the kill. When they changed that to have a hard 2-hit kill in Reach, there was outrage. The melee in Gears are always a complete joke until 5, but I doubt you'll find many fans praising that. After all, who wants to lose a Nasher fight to a punch? Doom changes this formula, so much so that I nearly put this in the gameplay section. Doom's punches are weak, probably does about 25% damage as far as I can tell, so 4 slow hits versus all the weapons in the game means you're probably not going to win your fights. It's fantastic in all honesty. It limits corner camping and stops you from getting a cheap trading kill when you've damaged them slightly. However, the melee comes into its own when the enemy is low on health, and they can be glory killed, flashing blue when killable but out of melee range, and orange when in range, exactly the same as it works in the campaign. The trade-off of this move is that it locks you into the animation and leaves you exposed for one of their teammates to pick you off, so you have a choice. Go for the melee and guarantee yourself a kill, but risk being taken out shortly after, or continue shooting, risk losing the firefight, but give yourself some valuable time to hunt down health and armour should you run into anyone else. Of course, shooty guns and fisticuffs aren't the only tool in your loadout. Doom also allows its players the choice of various equipment and runes to further round out your arsenal. Let's break them down a bit. Equipment mostly resembles Call of Duty's similarly named equipment, which mainly consists of what you'd expect, various types of grenade, explosive mines, threat sensors, but weirdly, Doom kinda combines some aspects of the armour abilities from the Halo series. Thrusters for extra vertical movement, shield walls and holograms, just to name a few. Again, I feel like Doom did a pretty good job here, and I feel that comes down to the cooldown timers after a piece of equipment has been used. Yes, no more will you be bombarded with 3 different types of grenade or carefully sneak past the 12 claymores leading up to that snaky sniper nest, only to have the 13th one detonate in your face. In Doom, you get one use and a fair old wait time before you go again. Don't get me wrong, these things pack a punch, so you've got to have your wits about you when someone is planting mines, but nothing that a quick reflex couldn't save you from. And there's definitely more viable equipment than others, as I've failed to see anyone actually fall for a hologram yet, but there's enough variation here to fit any playstyle or game mode. Confident in your slaying abilities? Take a shield wall or thruster to help you assault or defend your objective. Keep getting surprised by enemies flanking you? A very brief see-through wall hacks will help you better plan out your breach. They can really change the tide of a battle if used correctly. Now let's look at the runes, Doom's equivalent of perks. Pre-update, these things were pretty different in their implementation, formerly being a one-use item you'd acquire from leveling up. Thankfully, things didn't stay like that, and now you earn them as permanent unlocks, where you can pick up to 3 to bring into a match, but can only ever use 1 at a time, having to swap them out upon death and independently from your loadout. I love this method, as runes have pretty subtle effects, and aren't really anything that would be combined with specific guns or equipment to break the game. They are mainly things such as speed boosts when low on health or extra armour on respawn, so they tend to be used as a little bonus for whatever your playstyle is. My personal favourite is Vital Signs, as it lets me see the enemy's health as well as the location of teammates. I kind of feel like this should have been standard for everyone though, as it might help to give more feedback to the player on the amount of damage they're doing, instead of just a number that pops up when hit. I also like that they can be swapped out at will upon death, as it kind of lets you assess how you died and maybe pick a rune that'll work better for your current situation. Such as if the enemy team has a demon power-up, then using a rune to see where they are at all times could be more useful. At the same time, limiting it to 3 runes to pick from instead of using all 10 stops people from constantly switching, and lets you strategize on what will be most useful for you in any situation. Speaking of demons, that nicely transitions me onto the power weapons of the game, with some being a bit more traditional than others, shall we say. Why I think Doom works as an arena shooter with loadouts is that there's still an emphasis on power weapon control, whether that be a literal weapon that's powerful, or a rune that'll transform you into one of the 7 demons with ridiculous killing potential. Traditional power weapons are incredibly fun to use. These are things like the chainsaw, BFG and Gauss cannon, and they pack a punch. Limited ammo but a ridiculously large damage radius makes it hard to miss your target, and the ability to see through walls to find your prey is just pure overkill. Normally, I'd say these items are too overpowered, but given the limited use and long respawn timer, you'll be lucky to run into them twice in a match. I touched on the demon power-up briefly when I spoke about Soul Harvest, but basically when you become the demon, you lose your ability to use your default moveset such as firing your weapon, in favour of the demon's own unique moveset. Like I said, there's 7 to choose from, and they all have their own unique ways of attacking and moving. Some can fly, some can go invisible, and some rely solely on close range attacks. They each have varying degrees of health to make up for their differences in size and mobility, with the smaller faster ones being more frail. Outside of Soul Harvest, the demon has a limited amount of time which it can be used for, which helps to keep things pretty balanced. Overall, I think the demon is a fantastic addition to the multiplayer, granting the player increased firepower and mobility at the cost of diminishing health, and a timer means running in puts you directly in the firing line where you risk giving up your godly powers to the enemy, but sitting back means that you're wasting more of that potential. It's a brilliant way to balance the demon, and means that teamwork is needed on both sides to help keep control of the demon and keep victory in your hands. Equally, I'd say all but one of the demons is viable, Mancubus being the only one that isn't, given its colossal size and slow speed, It usually ends up as Swiss cheese pretty quickly, but everyone else works great with the map design. I like how some maps favour certain demons better than others, meaning there isn't any one demon that purely dominates at everything. For example, using the Prowler on any open area map and you're probably going to kill yourself by rocketing off into the abyss. But if you need lots of verticality, then you want the Revenant or Cacodemon, tight corridors and it's Spectre or Baron of Hell all the way. Essentially, these are just customizable power weapons, and the game is happy to let you pick the demon you want anytime throughout the match. Overall, I think these systems really play off each other very well, never having one power weapon or piece of equipment breaking away from the rest. It keeps the natural rush of a power weapon at the core of its gameplay, just as any arena shooter should. It's controlled chaos at its finest. Of course, with the modern gaming industry now being as lucrative as films and music, you have a near countless number of titles all screaming over each other for your attention. Yes, gone are the simple days of playing a multiplayer game because it's fun. Now you need to be rewarded for your dedication, and the best way to do that is with cosmetic items. Cosmetic items as rewards are a great incentive. They don't change gameplay unlike a weapon locked behind a paywall would. They can add to the lore of the franchise if they so wished, and they let players feel unique from others in matches and pre-game lobbies. Honestly, Doom 2016 shines in its customization, with 32 unique armour sets to choose from, each with 3 variants, as well as being able to mix and match helmets, torsos, leg and arm pieces, lighting, and under armour any way you please. This is something fans of the Halo series have been clambering for since Reach. Halo 4 and 5 failed to come close, and Infinite needs some serious changes before it'll live up to this. Not only that, but with 107 patterns, 141 colours, a dirt and scratch effect slider, you can make something truly special with the tools they give you. And that's not just the armour, everything I just listed also applies to your weapons as well. It's a crying shame there isn't some kind of paint shop where you could buy and sell your designs, as it could literally help the less artistic amongst us take advantage of the full palette. With that, add in the 225 taunts, this game's equivalent of emotes, whose comedic tone works surprisingly well here, and you've got plenty to keep yourself occupied as you progress through the ranks. The sheer amount of content this game packs in is staggering, and it's all unlocked from simply leveling up. No premium battle pass, no loot boxes, play the game, and the best stuff will come to you naturally. Combining all of these elements really helps the player feel unique on the battlefield, as they can quickly earn enough items to separate themselves from the crowd. The developers even had the foresight to include 4 custom armour slots to quickly allow players to swap between their favourites. A simple feature, but one that shows developers really wanted you to have freedom to be creative. You don't have to worry about losing your custom paint job suit with exactly 33% on the dirt and scratch slider. Just use another slot and see where your creativity takes you. Like I said, you earn everything from leveling up, going through 11 echelons, this game's version of prestiges, each with 50 ranks. It never feels like a grind, as every level requires no more than 5000 XP to progress. Sure, it means that it probably won't keep you invested for months at a time, constantly trying to claw you back in with promises of new loot, but it honestly didn't need to. This isn't a live service game full of microtransactions. You paid your price of admission when you bought the game, now it's time to be rewarded. Oh no, this game respected your time. Every match played, whether you won or lost, drew you ever closer to unlocking something new, and it wasn't difficult to gain a level a match. Even then though, if you were struggling to earn that armour piece of your dreams, challenges offered a nice alternative to levelling up. So you hit max rank, something no other multiplayer game of this generation seems to want you to do. What's your reward? You get to become the Doomslayer himself, allowing the use of the Praetor suit for those dedicated enough to wear it. Along with this, you're also granted an animated nameplate in the lobby screen, making your achievement instantly recognisable to all who dare challenge you. A cool reward for sure, bringing a character from the campaign to be at your command once more. You're not just a lowly grunt anymore, you have a legacy, one which everyone will soon witness in action. My only complaint with this reward is that the suit itself is rather bland by comparison. It's not an insult at its design, but rather a testament to the quality of the customization you unlocked along the way. I honestly feel more unique using my personal armour than the Praetor suit, and I love that. Finally, I have to give credit to the stats menu. I really appreciate that the included information list for commendations, performance and medals. It's something that seems to be on its way out lately, but I think it really adds to the whole experience. Being able to look back over your medals and see how many sprees you've earned, or finding out there was recognition for some obscure way to kill an enemy makes the whole thing seem worthwhile, hell, maybe even nostalgic if you uncover these stats years after playing. One mode I often feel gets lost to the void is the Snap mode, Doom's attempt at a Forge-like creation tool. It's easy to see why it gets overlooked. The campaign was fantastic and showed the industry that the FPS genre hadn't lost all its sense of originality, while the multiplayer was scorned for its many perceived flaws. Truth be told, I haven't ever given Snap mode all that much of a chance either, outside of playing through far enough to earn the associated achievement, but since I was writing about the PvP multiplayer, it only felt fair to give this a shot. Like I say, on the surface, it's just Forge mode from Halo, giving players options to create and share maps with other players online, but looking deeper, there's so much more to this package. In my time with Snapmap, I found users who had created classic Doom levels, built tower defense games, even let me flex my mediocre Doom knowledge with a pop quiz. This isn't just a map creator. It gives players something to enjoy against each other, cooperatively, or even solo, meaning that there's something here for everyone. It even has all the armour and weapon customization from the multiplayer, but has to be unlocked separately by the use of currency, which you earn from playing Snapmap creations. Weirdly enough, in this mode they even let you customise weapons like the BFG and chainsaw, just like you do with loadout weapons. It's a nitpick, but it's a shame you can't do that in multiplayer. There's plenty of building tools here for the creative types to utilise, and I think that contributed to its downfall. It's just too damn complicated. It doesn't feel accessible to the more casual audience who just want to change a few options such as infinite ammo or damage percentages, or limit loadout weapons when creating some simple quirky maps. It's all or nothing. This is shown in the fact that developers include tutorials complete with puzzles and a link to the Snapmap wiki to help budding creators take their first steps in this mode. As much as I think there's a steep difficulty curve, I really appreciate this detail, and it's one I wish more developers would add into their games. I feel that the lack of a player base really ruins Snapmap's potential. When I see games like Halo and Super Mario Maker, I feel that Doom had the potential to rival those. With a decent sized population and a custom game browser, the tools here could be the next big thing. Sure, there's areas for improvement, but that's what sequels are for, right? Oh wait, we got battle mode instead. Ah, shit. Ultimately, Doom 2016's Snap mode and multiplayer never really took off, and in the year of our Lord 2021 has all but died a death. You may have noticed from the gameplay that everything I've recorded has been against bots in the practice mode. Thanks for adding that, by the way, that is also a really good feature. And that's because on European servers it seems impossible to get a match going on the Xbox and Switch versions. Furthermore, Snapmap offered meagre pickings and most categories in the browser brought back no results. Overall, there isn't any doubt in my mind that this multiplayer and Snap mode had a clear vision on what they wanted to be. From my perspective, the campaign, multiplayer and Snapmap are greater than the sum of their parts. They make a complete game, something that's actually quite rare these days in the FPS genre. Halo 5 released a year earlier and had the vast majority of its content drip-fed to us over the years, while cramming in as many microtransactions as possible into an already full-price package, and Halo Infinite seems to be set to follow that trend. But I digress. The fact is, Doom 2016 released as a complete product. Sure, it had refinements and extras, but all of the core experience was there to be enjoyed on day one. I don't think we should understate that. From my time with Doom, I really felt like id Software wanted to create something that rivaled the Halo 3 experience, having something for everyone and being a bit of a social hub with its Snapmap, pre-game lobbies and customization options. And with this much thought gone into it, it's hard to say the multiplayer was a half-baked idea tacked onto a fantastic single-player campaign just to pad out the experience. To me, every mechanic just works perfectly with one another. I think Doom 2016's multiplayer is fantastic and vastly underappreciated. I'm sure you got that from the title though, so I desperately hope that it'll be revisited again one day when the inevitable new Doom 3 launches. It's the hill that I'll die on, but hopefully I've been able to express why I feel so strongly about it. Of course, this is just one person's opinion on something that feels lost to time, so as I finish writing my first video, I ask you, my dear viewer, what are your thoughts on this matter? Does any of this hold true with you, or was this multiplayer as much of a mess as everyone has made out from day one? Finally, I want to thank you for watching this far in, if indeed you still are. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in the next one. In the words of Great Hedgehog, sayonara.